When a man starts to fall in love, something subtle but incredibly powerful begins to shift in the way he engages with the world and especially with the woman he's falling for. It's not about flowers or grand declarations or Instagram-worthy gestures. It's about presence, protection, and emotional attunement. Most people associate protection with physical acts, shielding you from danger or standing up for you in a confrontation. But that's only one part of it. The deeper, more hidden form of protection is emotional. When a man is falling for you, your feelings start to matter to him in a way they didn't before. He begins to internalize your emotional state. He watches the way your energy shifts, even when you try to hide it. He becomes tuned into you, not out of obligation, but because something inside him wants to make sure you're okay. At first, he may not even understand why he feels the urge to check in more, or why your silence feels louder than anyone else's. It's because your emotional safety has now become part of his instinct. He's not just thinking about how he feels anymore, he's thinking about how you feel too. That's the beginning of real intimacy. And for a man, especially one who's not used to navigating those depths, it can be scary. Vulnerability isn't something that's often encouraged in men. From a young age, many are taught to toughen up, keep it together, don't cry, don't talk too much about emotions. So when love starts to open that door, it can feel unfamiliar. And instead of saying it out loud, he shows it through behavior. You might notice him reaching out more consistently, not just when it's convenient for him, but when he senses something's off with you. If you've had a long day or something disappointed you, he won't always have the perfect words to make it better, but he'll try to be present. He'll ask, "You okay?" or want to talk about it. Not because he's trying to pry, but because he's genuinely affected when something is weighing on you. You'll see it in his body language, in the way he softens around you. Even his silences become protective. He'll let you talk, or he'll just sit with you in your low moments. And sometimes that quiet presence is the loudest expression of his care. Another sign is how he starts being mindful of what might hurt or upset you, even unintentionally. He doesn't want to be the reason for your stress. He becomes careful with his words. He may pause before reacting, or reconsider plans if he thinks they'll overwhelm you. He starts looking out for your peace of mind. If you're anxious, he tries to calm the storm, not with lectures but with small reassurances, thoughtful check-ins, or by handling things without needing applause. He starts thinking ahead, asking himself, how will this affect her, even before he makes certain decisions. That's the kind of emotional intelligence that love quietly activates in a man. This protective instinct goes beyond just your bad days. It extends into how he supports your dreams, your boundaries, and your confidence. If someone speaks to you in a dismissive way, he notices. If you downplay your talents, he gently reminds you of your worth. He doesn't let you forget how capable you are. And it's not because he's trying to boost his own image as the good guy. It's because something in him feels proud of you, inspired by you. And when a man feels that, he becomes fiercely loyal to the idea of protecting what makes you you, your light, your spirit, your softness, your strength. Sometimes that protection shows up in ways you might overlook. He's not just defending you from external harm, he's also trying to protect you from yourself when self-doubt creeps in. You might brush off a compliment, and he'll say it again, firmer this time because he means it. You might overextend yourself trying to please everyone, and he'll remind you that it's okay to rest. He starts becoming a mirror that reflects not your flaws but your beauty, your value, and your essence, even when you struggle to see it. And here's something even more telling. When he's falling in love, your happiness starts to matter in a way that directly affects his. If you're hurting, he feels it, not as an obligation but as a reaction from his heart. It weighs on him, he thinks about it when you're not around. He may even wrestle with how to help, how to fix it, even when it's not something he can fix. That feeling, that ache to make things better for you, is love in its purest, most unspoken form. And for many men that's terrifying, because it means they no longer have control. You now have emotional power, and he may not admit it, but it's there, it's real. It's in the way he asks how your day went. Not out of politeness, but because if it wasn't good, it affects his day too. The shift becomes even more apparent when he's dealing with his own emotion. Maybe something's bothering him, but if he sees that you are having a tough day, he shelves it for the moment. Not because he's suppressing it, but because your heart becomes just as important as his own. He's not thinking me first anymore, he's thinking us. And that's one of the biggest signs of real emotional investment. Sometimes protection shows up when he disagrees with you too. He might challenge you, but never in a way that belittles you. If he disagrees, it's with respect. If he sees you heading towards something that might hurt you, he doesn't stay silent. Even if it's uncomfortable, he speaks up. Not to control you, but because he cares. And that's important to recognize. Protection isn't always about making you feel good in the moment. Sometimes it's about holding you accountable to the version of yourself you told him you want to become. One of the quietest but clearest signs is how he talks about you when you're not around. If you happen to hear what he says about you to others, his friends, his family, you'll notice he speaks with pride, with softness, with admiration. And that's not performance, that's protection. It's how he keeps your reputation safe, even when you're not there to defend it yourself. All of these things, the check-ins, the listening, the small adjustments, the quiet pride, are love's early language. And most of the time he'll never say, "I'm doing this because I'm falling for you." He won't write it in a message or announce it with a microphone. He may not even realize he's doing it, but if you look closely, you'll feel it in every gesture, every pause, every time he chooses kindness over ego, every time he shows up not just to enjoy your light, but to make sure no one dims it, not even you. When a man begins to fall in love, he starts to think beyond the moment. It's no longer just about having fun, spending time together, or even building chemistry. There's a subtle but unmistakable shift where he begins to imagine what life might look like with you in it. Not just for a night or a weekend, but for months, years, maybe even forever. He doesn't always announce this shift. He doesn't say, "I'm picturing us living together," or "I wonder what our kids would look like." That would make him feel exposed. So instead, he begins testing the future quietly, indirectly, but intentionally. You'll start to notice it in the types of questions he asks. He brings up topics like travel, family, lifestyle, and goals, but not randomly. These questions come wrapped in casual conversation. Maybe he asks, "Do you ever see yourself living in a small town?" Or "What kind of wedding would you want, if you had one?" These don't come out of nowhere. They come because in his mind, there's a version of the future he's building, and he wants to see if you fit into it, not just emotionally, but logistically and ideologically. He wants to know if your lives are moving in the same direction. And this isn't because he's over-planning or desperate. It's because love turns short-term thinkers into long-term visionaries. He may even present you with small hypothetical choices. Things like, if you had to choose between a beach house and a cabin in the woods, which would you pick? Or would you ever want to move to another country? These are fun on the surface, but underneath them is something deeper. He's collecting information. He's trying to find alignment. He wants to know, if I choose her and she chooses me, could we actually build something that works in the long run? That's the invisible dialogue happening inside his head. Sometimes it's not even in the questions, it's in the way he starts including you in his language. He might casually say, "When we go to that concert next year," or "We should do a road trip in the fall." These aren't just throwaway comments, they're projections, tiny blueprints. When a man is falling in love, he starts speaking in we, instead of me. And often he does it without even realizing it, because the mind begins to shift first. Long before the full emotional confession comes out of his mouth, he's already inching you into his plans, just to see how it feels, just to see if you'll follow him there in the conversation. He also starts sharing his own plans more openly. He tells you about a business idea he's thinking of launching, a career move he's considering, a dream he's been sitting on, not because he expects you to be part of it yet, but because he's testing whether your values align. If he wants to travel the world and you're someone who values roots and stability, he needs to understand that early, not because it's a deal breaker, but because falling in love makes you start to care about compatibility in ways you didn't before. Suddenly the things he used to overlook become important. Your opinion on money, your view on kids, your habits, your sense of ambition. He's not just falling for your charm, he's starting to think like a teammate. Another subtle way future testing shows up is in how he reacts to your dream. When you talk about something you want, whether it's owning a home, changing careers, or living by the ocean, he doesn't brush it off or change the subject. He listens. He might even ask follow-up questions, not because he has all the answers, but because he's mentally checking. Could I support that dream? Could I be part of that journey? Would her future still allow space for mine? These are not surface-level reflections, they're deep considerations disguised as simple curiosity. And here's where it gets even more nuanced. A man who's falling in love may also start adjusting his own goals slightly, based on what he's learning about your. Maybe he once thought he'd move across the country, but now he's not so sure, because you're here and suddenly, here doesn't seem so bad. Or maybe he never thought he'd settle down for a while, but now the idea of coming home to you every day doesn't feel like settling. It feels like peace. He doesn't always talk about these shifts, but if you're paying attention you'll see them. You'll feel how his language softens around the idea of permanence. You'll notice him becoming less rigid, more open. That's because love rearranges priorities in the background, often before either person even realizes it. There's also a kind of vulnerability in this process that can be easily missed. Future testing isn't just about seeing if you fit into his plan. It's also about slowly revealing parts of himself that matter most. His fears, his hopes, his timeline. When he starts opening up about the things he truly wants but maybe hasn't said out loud to many people, he's not just making conversation, he's letting you see the man behind the mask. That's a huge step for anyone, especially someone who's been emotionally guarded in the past. Because with love comes the question, can I trust you with the real me? Can I imagine you by my side when I go for this dream? And even if he doesn't use romantic words to express it, his actions will tell you everything. He starts carving out routines that involve you. He wants to spend weekends with you. He introduces you to people who matter to him. He shows you parts of his life that were previously private. These aren't random decisions. They are tiny bricks laid on the path towards something lasting. He's trying to see how you walk on that path. If you walk beside him naturally, if the pace feels good, if the road feels exciting instead of uncertain. And sometimes the most revealing part of future testing is what doesn't get said. There might be a pause in the conversation after you talk about moving abroad or starting your own company. You might notice him reflecting more deeply after you share a dream. That pause is important. It means he's listening not just with his ears but with his mind. He's visualizing. He's asking himself if he's the man who could support that. That moment of reflection may look small, but it's massive, because it means he's not just hearing your future, he's considering becoming part of it. Love doesn't always announce itself with clarity. Sometimes it whispers through these moments, through the questions that seem light but are rooted in intention, through the we instead of me, through the little shifts in direction that speak louder than any romantic confession. When a man is falling in love, the future stops being a distant idea. It becomes something he starts rehearsing with you in the frame, even if he's not ready to say it out loud. When a man is falling in love, one of the most transformative things he begins to do, often without even realizing it, is listen differently. Listening becomes less about filling space in the conversation or playing a role, and more about truly trying to understand the woman in front of him. This kind of listening isn't passive, it's intentional, it's focused, it's emotionally connected. And it often feels very different from the way he's listened to others in the past, because now, for the first time in a long time, he actually cares what the answers mean. Not just for the sake of curiosity, but because those answers help him build a deeper bond. He's gathering pieces of who you are, trying to make sense of them, hold them, and slowly connect them to the way he's beginning to feel. You can feel this difference almost immediately. When a man is falling in love, he stops listening just to respond. Instead, he listens to absorb. He's not thinking about what clever thing to say next. He's not scanning for moments to impress you with his stories. He's tuned in, focused. He picks up on the shifts in your tone, your expressions, your pauses. He notices when something matters to you, even if you don't say it directly. He pays attention to what lights you up and what shuts you down. And you'll know it because he brings those things back in moments that surprise you. You'll casually mention a childhood memory, a favorite book, a struggle you've been through, and weeks later, he'll reference it. Not to win points, not to make a move, but because he actually remembered. That's one of the strongest indicators that a man is listening with his heart. When he brings up something you thought he forgot, something small you only mentioned once, it means he filed it away because it mattered to you. That's how love works. We begin to hold on to what matters to the other person, because slowly, their story becomes part of ours. A man falling in love doesn't need reminders to pay attention. His emotional investment becomes his motivation. He's studying your emotional language, your unique rhythm, your sensitivities, and your strengths, not as a strategy, but because knowing you deeply feels meaningful. And it's not just about listening to your words. He listens to what's underneath them. If you say you're fine but your energy says otherwise, he doesn't just move on. He senses the gap between your words and your truth. He may not always know how to ask the right question, and he may even hesitate out of fear of pushing too far, but he notices, he sits with it. And often he'll come back to it later, when the moment feels safe. That's because a man in love isn't looking for a quick fix. He's looking to understand you, not just the version you show to the world, but the one behind the curtain, the version you only reveal when you feel truly sick. This kind of listening also changes how he reacts when you're upset, frustrated, or stressed. He doesn't try to dominate the conversation with solutions right away. He doesn't minimize your feelings by saying, "It's not a big deal." Instead, he listens with empathy. He might offer support, or he might just sit with you in the discomfort. Because when a man is falling in love, he realizes that listening isn't always about solving, it's about holding space for your emotions, your stories, your fears, without rushing to change or fix them. He learns to be present, even when he doesn't have all the answers. You'll notice this especially when you start to open up about parts of your life that are raw or vulnerable. Things like past heartbreaks, insecurities, regrets, or childhood wounds. You may expect him to pull away, to get uncomfortable, or check out, but if he's truly falling, you'll feel him lean in. Maybe not always with the perfect words, maybe he'll fumble, or be quiet at first. But his energy won't pull away. He's listening not just to the details, but to the emotions underneath. And that kind of listening builds safety. It tells you without needing to be spoken, "I'm not going anywhere," and that safety flows both ways. Because as he listens more deeply to you, he also starts opening up more himself. He sees that the more space he holds for you, the more space you create for him in return. That's how emotional intimacy is built, through mutual listening that isn't rushed or transactional. He begins to trust that he can show you his fears, his uncertainties, his dreams, and that you'll listen the same way he listened to you, without judgment, without rushing. Just with presence. Listening also shows up in the way he adapts. When a man is falling for you, you'll notice how he quietly makes small shifts in the way he speaks, acts, or shows up, based on what he's learned from listening to you. If you've expressed that you feel unheard in the past, he's more mindful not to talk over you. If you've shared that you need space when you're overwhelmed, he gives it to you without guilt or confusion. If you've mentioned that quality time matters more to you than gifts, he starts showing up with more time, more attention. He doesn't need to be told twice, because once he knows what matters to you, he listens with action, not just ears, and sometimes it's in the way he doesn't interrupt you when you're figuring something out. He lets you talk things through, even if it takes time. He doesn't rush to fill every pause. He gives you the space to articulate your truth. That patience, that stillness, that's a form of love too, because in a world that moves fast, that jumps to conclusions, that scrolls past depth, a man who truly listens stands out. He becomes someone you can exhale around, someone who gets you not because you had to explain every detail, but because he took the time to pay attention. And that's the thing, love listens differently. It doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't need applause. It listens at 2 a.m. when you're tired and rambling. It listens when you're excited about something small. It listens when you don't even realize you're revealing something important. And a man who's falling in love doesn't just hear you, he feels the story you're telling and the parts you haven't told yet. And little by little he becomes someone you can trust, not just with your words, but with the spaces between them. When a man is falling in love, time with you begins to take on a new meaning. It's no longer about planning the next impressive date or showing up just to check the box of consistency. Instead, he starts prioritizing your presence in ways that feel effortless and genuine. It's not forced, it's not performative, it's quiet and steady and deeply telling. Because for a man who is truly falling, just being near you becomes one of his favorite things, even if nothing special is happening. This is one of those signs that often goes unnoticed, because it doesn't come with fireworks. It shows up in the small decisions, when he chooses to spend his free time with you instead of his usual routine, or when he starts rearranging parts of his schedule just to create space for you. Maybe he gets off work late, but he still calls you to talk before bed. Or maybe he had plans with his friends, but asks if you want to join, not because he feels obligated, but because your presence is something he genuinely enjoys. When he starts looking for ways to bring you into his everyday life, it's not a coincidence, it's a reflection of how important you're becoming to him. One of the clearest signs of this shift is when he starts including you in the mundane parts of his day, the parts that don't involve excitement or adrenaline or romance. Grocery shopping, picking up dry cleaning, sitting in silence while you both scroll on your phones. These moments may seem insignificant, but they matter, because when a man welcomes you into his routine, into the parts of his life that don't require effort or performance, he's showing you that your presence has become a comfort. He's saying without words, you fit into my life just as it is. That's intimacy, not the curated, filtered kind, but the real kind, the kind that builds quietly, moment by moment. He might start inviting you to do the most ordinary things, running errands, grabbing coffee, watching him work. And at first, you might question whether those things are romantic, but they are, because love doesn't always look like candlelit dinners or surprise weekend getaways. Sometimes love looks like folding laundry together while laughing about a dumb movie. Sometimes it looks like cooking dinner in silence, just enjoying being in the same space. When he's falling for you, even the quiet moments feel full, not because of what you're doing, but because you're doing it together. And it's not just about physical presence, it's about emotional presence too. You'll notice he starts showing up more intentionally, not just for the highlights of your life, but for the ordinary rhythms. He remembers when you have a big meeting. He checks in when you mention you're feeling anxious. He becomes someone who's not just there when it's convenient, but also when it matters most. That consistency, that reliability, that's how men communicate emotional investment. And for someone who may have guarded their time closely before, it's a big deal, because making space for someone new in your life means you're willing to change the shape of your days. He also begins to look for opportunities to create shared experiences, not necessarily flashy ones, but meaningful ones. A walk in the park, a movie night at home, a random drive with no destination. He's not just thinking, what can we do that's fun? He's thinking, how can we keep building memories together? And when a man is thinking that way, you'll feel it. There's a quiet thoughtfulness in the way he plans, in the way he follows up, in the way he shows up again and again. You might also notice that he doesn't need a reason to call or message anymore. It's not always about making plans or asking something specific. Sometimes it's just a quick thinking of you, or a photo that made him laugh, or a random song that reminded him of you. These are small things on the surface, but they mean a lot, because they show that you're not just a part of his schedule, you've become part of his inner world. You're in his thoughts throughout the day. He starts reaching out not because he has to, but because he wants to feel close to you, even when he can't physically be there. And when you are together, you'll notice how he's not distracted. He's not on his phone half the time. He's not rushing through the moment. He's there fully. And even when you're just sitting in silence, you can feel that presence, that grounding, that calm that comes when two people genuinely enjoy being around each other without needing to entertain or impress. That kind of presence is rare. And when a man starts giving it to you regularly, it's a sign that he's emotionally invested on a deep level. Another subtle thing that happens is that he begins to protect your time together. He starts valuing it in a way that's different from how he used to treat. If something comes up, he lets you know. If he needs to reschedule, he does it with care. He doesn't take your time for granted, because now being with you isn't just an option, it's a priority. And that shift, even if unspoken, tells you everything. It tells you that your presence isn't just enjoyable to him, it's important. What's also worth noticing is how he handles shared downtime. Does he seem restless, Or does he settle in beside you, content to just... A man who's falling for you becomes more comfortable with stillness when you're around. He doesn't need constant stimulation. He doesn't need to fill every silence. He starts to feel at home in your presence. That's the word that best describes it. Home. When you start to feel like home to him, that's when you know something real is happening. And he may not even realize it at first, but you will, because it's in the way he lingers after the night is over, in the way he slows down when you're near, in the way he starts creating rituals that involve you. And maybe the most beautiful part of all this is that it isn't about control or obligation. He's not changing his schedule because you asked. He's not making time for you to avoid conflict. He's doing it because something in him wants to be around. Your presence brings him peace, energy, clarity, or comfort, or maybe all of those things at once. And when a man starts feeling that way, it reshapes the way he moves through the world. You become part of his rhythm, part of what makes life better, richer, more grounding. This kind of presence is the foundation of lasting love. Not just the spark, not just the attraction, but the day in, day out presence that builds trust, intimacy, and depth. And when a man is falling in love, he gives you that presence, not as a gift he can take back, but as a part of himself that says, this matters more than anything else I could be doing right now. So if you've ever wondered whether a man is truly falling in love, don't just listen to what he says, watch how he shows up. It's in the way he protects your emotions without needing credit, the way he quietly tests the future with you in it, the way he listens not to reply but to understand, and how your presence becomes something he doesn't just enjoy but need. Real love isn't always shouted from rooftops, often it's whispered through actions, consistent, intentional, and deeply human. When a man is falling, his love won't always be loud, but it will be unmistakable.